A great many years elapsed before Andros returned to the site of the alleged crime, this time for business. A blue-eyed, blonde-haired youth, no more than about 16 or 17 years of age, greeted him at the tall iron gates which guarded the entrance to the farmhouse. "Is this the Nicolais residence?" Andros asked the youth. "This is it," the youth replied. "My parents aren't here today, but they said you were coming to pick up some cedar wood for your fireplace. Is that right?" "Yeah. Come with me. I'll show you where it is." "Nicolais never told me he had a son," said Andros. The youth smiled. "My parents are very private people." As they walked, Andros noticed a golden chain around the youth's neck. His eyes dropped lower. A gold-plated coin swung over his pectorals as he walked. Andros noticed that the word Naivis was inscribed around its rim. "What's that thing around your neck?" Andros asked. "It says Naivis on it. Doesn't that mean foundling?" "Oh, that's my name," the youth replied. "My dad hung it around my neck days after he found me." "Found you?" "Yeah, right over there," Naivis said, pointing towards the cornfields. "I was a wee little thing when they found me, barely 4 days old. My mother said she'd seen a dream in which God bestowed a gift upon the household. A gift from God. He told my mother that they should expect to find a bundle of joy in the most unlikely of places." "Oh, I'm not sure how much of it I believe," Mavis went on, fumbling the coin around his neck, "but I do know that I'm adopted. I look nothing like my mother or father." Andros felt blood rush up to his head. How could this have happened? How could that damned servant of his have betrayed him like this? There could be no question that this was the same child he'd conspired to murder eons ago. He knew that time was running out. He had to act fast to hold the unravelling prophecy dead in its tracks. "What's wrong?" Mavis asked him. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Well, there's also another reason why I'm here, one your parents don't know about," said Andros. "Go on." "I've got an important message that needs to reach home as soon as possible," Andros winced, "and there's simply no way that I can deliver it in time. My carriage was stolen by some armed thieves back there. Walking will take me days." Naevis shrugged his back. "Don't let that bother you. I'll deliver it." "Are you sure?" "Yes," Naevis said. "I've got a horse all saddled up and ready to go." Andros withdrew a small parchment from his pocket and scribbled something onto it using a black fillet quill. He folded the letter neatly in half and handed it over to Naevis. "It's for my wife's eyes only," Andros told him. "It's for her and only her." "Understood," said Naevis. "I can't read, so you have nothing to worry about." The journey back to Andros' residence was full of surprises. He'd been propositioned by a fortune-telling gypsy, attempted to commune with foreigners who spoke in strange tongues, and brushed shoulders with the Archbishop of the Greek Orthodox Church. But there was one specific event that stood out, one he couldn't quite jettison from thought during the duration of the trip. It had occurred near water. His intentions to stop for a brief hiatus had been sabotaged by his lethargy, and his exhaustion was such that he fell asleep beside the river, asleep by the running waters. He awoke to the realization that the position of the letter inside his jacket had moved. It was now inside the front pocket of his pants. Had someone moved it whilst he lay on the ground completely unawares? Stranger still was that it didn't even look like the same letter. It had changed somehow. In any case, he attributed the phenomenon to his tired mind and pushed on, arriving at his intended destination before nightfall. The residence was an oppressively opulent mansion, framed by beautiful balustrades and decorated with stone lions, eagles, and mythological creatures of every kind. It was a residence fit for the noblest of kings and queens. As he dismounted his animal, he caught sight of the supernal maiden looking out from one of the windows. Naevis guessed it was Andros' daughter. He was entirely transfixed by her gaze. Desire began to well up from the fountainhead of his psyche. It fueled a ravenous fire that burned in the pit of his heart and loins. It was love at first sight. An elderly woman with sharp features was waiting for him at the door. "Good evening, madam. Would you happen to be Andros' wife?" "Yeah, it is I," she said. "I have an urgent message for you," he said, handing the letter over. "Thank you." Naevis watched as her eyes scanned the document. The creases around her eyes and lips deepened as her lips curled into a smile. "Finally," she said, throwing the letter in the air. "Oh, I so knew that God would urge him into the light and persuade him to change his mind about our daughter. Finally she will be wed." "To whom?" Naevis asked, feeling a tight knot form in his stomach. "To you, my boy," she yelled, pulling Naevis towards her. "You are the bearer of good news. He wants me to summon a priest and marry the two of you before his return." Naevis couldn't believe his fruit-laden luck. It struck gold. Andros returned home a week afterward, expecting to find Navis dead, buried and confined to the existence of the terrible past. Instead, he was greeted by an entourage that included his wife, son, daughter, and an uninvited guest. He nearly had a coronary when he glimpsed the rings that hugged the index fingers of the latter two. He opened and closed his eyes rapidly and scrunched his face, but the hallucination wouldn't disappear. It merely grew more concrete by the passing second. Navis was still alive, and what was worse is that he was now part of the family, a son-in-law, and possible heir to his kingdom. Andros cussed under his breath. His wife was certainly the primal cause of this inveiglement. It was she who was the cause of this evil, for she had openly flouted his authority. He waited until they were alone afterwards to vent his mounting fury. "What possessed you to do such a thing?" he yelled at her. "Why didn't you do what I asked of you?" "Stop screaming. I did exactly what you asked of me," she replied, throwing the letter at him. "That's your writing, isn't it?" Andros scanned the letter. He stared at it aghast, staring at the words inscribed on the page in utter disbelief. "It is," he heard himself whisper. "So what has angered you?" she asked. "It doesn't matter," he said. "In the morning I need an urgent message delivered to the lumberjacks working our land up north." "Yes? I'll leave a letter on the kitchen table first thing in the morning before I head into town," he continued. "You make sure that Navis is up to deliver it. You hear?" "Sure. Navis is to deliver it," he repeated, walking out of the mansion and slamming the door shut behind him. The following morning, Andros returned from completing some errands to find his wife picking dandelions, sunflowers, and roses from the garden. "Look," she prompted her husband. "Do you like what I picked for Navis and our daughter? I'm going to put them in a vase and take them up to the room now. I want to surprise them." "Wait a second," Andros yelled. "Didn't you send Navis to the lumberjacks with the letter I left on the kitchen table?" "Oh yeah," she said. "I forgot to tell you. He was still asleep when I went upstairs this morning. I didn't want to wake him, for he looked so peaceful beside our daughter." Andros's heart was beating so hard he thought he might explode. So I sent it up with our son." "You did what?" he screamed. "You stupid woman!" "Why are you upset?" she asked. "How long ago did you send him?" Andros asked. "About half an hour ago," his wife answered. Andros hastened to the lumberjacks, running as fast as his legs would carry him, in a bid to overtake the tragedy which loomed so tangible in the air now, but it was too late. The letter was addressed to the rustic, heartless mountaineers who worked for him, and was a threatening order which sanctioned the death and dismemberment of the person who handed it to them. When Andros arrived, they had already disposed of his son's body parts in a nearby well. Letting out an ululation of despair, Andros threw himself into the well and perished. After the grim news of the horrific deaths reached the household, his wife jettisoned all sanity and became possessed by madness which drove her to commit suicide in the heat of the moment. They say that everything comes in threes. If we so adhere to this philosophy, then it might not be so surprising to know that on that fateful day, the personification of death known to the Greeks as Charos came to collect the souls of the father, and unfortunately those of the innocent mother and son. This left Navis and his newly wedded wife as the sole inheritors of a dowry fit for the noblest of kings and queens. On the whole, Navis had little to complain about, for the fates were indeed ruminating in bliss at the same time he was born. Hence, their smiles were in his every breath and in his every train of thought. They pervaded everything that Navis did, and carried him aloft a magic carpet to worlds where everything he touched just turned to gold. And thus concludes the incredible story of the man called Navis, who was favoured by the three fates.